to nice perks of open source, I forgot to say one thing. You know how people leave reviews usually when they're annoyed at something? Like if you go to a restaurant and you get bad service, that's where you leave a review. But if you just enjoy the food, you don't really write anything. It's the same with open source. So even if you're not contributing to projects, but you find some project useful, maybe send a tweet or an email to the person that made it and say thank you. It makes my day. Yeah. It doesn't cost you much, but sending a small message to the creator actually gives us power and empowers us to work on this project more. Because if everything works, oftentimes you just don't hear anything until you make a breaking change, and then everyone is angry. You didn't even know people used it, right? So it's something to keep in mind.
This is like part of the best part of conferences, I think. Like today, someone came and told me, "Thank you for the work you're doing on RX and the combined stuff," and I agree. Had to steal the show, had to grab all the applause. Yeah. Late entrance, nice.
No quick video? I want to see the quick video again for...
This is where you talk,
Steph. Very particular detail about that. Okay, so welcome everybody. We are trying to host the usual roundtable talking about open source and what are the challenges. So we have Pedro, KRZYSZTOF, SHAI, and MARCIN. They are big players in the open source world, I would say. More or less, you may have some experience into that, as far as I can tell. And so, I do not, but I will try to host the best I can. So, to get started, what's your main project you were been working on? I think you can spot that from the t-shirt.
A t-shirt, yeah.
Yeah, well, I gave a talk about it this morning. So it's Tuist and Proj, both Swift open source projects. They started in 2017, so 7 years of work on them.
I think it would take too much time to name all of them. Sorcerer is probably the most known, but it's been 12 years since I open sourced the first one.
Yeah, I think the project I'm most known for is probably Arc Swift, which I've been working on for the past also probably 6 or 7 years. And I also did a lot of work on combined community-related extensions when Combine came out, so a lot of stuff around that as well.
Mine is CryptoSwift. I don't know for how long it's going on, but yeah, it's there and it's getting more stars. I have more open source, but that one is the most popular.
So what was the biggest challenges that you were encountering about behind that, starting maybe from the fact that an open source project requires, it's very demanding because people, it's actually going to use that for free and it's going to take you lots of time to probably maintain it. So what's your...
Yeah, Pedro will have a lot to say about the monetization aspect.
Pedro for last.
Yeah, I'm going to say a quick word about that. That I think the biggest challenge is the free mentality that consumers sometimes have, and I deserve it mentality sometimes. Like I think that all of us, when we started our own projects respectively, just did it out of a few things. First is like, I have a cool idea, I really want to try and build it, maybe it'll work out. Maybe I did for my own use case, and then it exploded beyond recognition. And then just like experimenting and having fun with it, and all of a sudden it might become very popular. And a lot of times we have like super positive experiences where someone just comes into the project and, you know, contributes a lot of code, changes things around, helps in. And sometimes you have the less pleasant experiences of people, you know, coming with issues such as, why are you not cutting the latest release? I am dependent on it for my work. I just told Pedro about this. Someone opened an issue and said, if you do not, we will have to reconsider our usage of your frame. I'm like, stop using it. Who cares? Am I earning money for your usage? So I think this sort of mentality of like people thinking that maybe people hallucinated that we're actually earning money from this is like very funny. sometimes to me, and a bit disrespectful. I think it's coming from a good place, just maybe a bit of like not being informed how this stuff works. That's my TED Talk.
Whoever wants to go next.
For me, the challenge was to actually get the people involved. You know, nobody do crypto, and I didn't know what I'm doing myself, and people really were like intimidated by the fact that crypto is, all this stuff. That's maybe too hard. So I had to do all this stuff by myself, and I didn't know that it's getting traction and that people use that until somebody pointed out that my release was, I break the API, but the change was, I changed minor, not major, number. I didn't care about that much. Yeah, if somebody helped me, that would be nice. Currently, I do have one more person on the project, but yeah, I struggle to build a community probably because of the topic.
I read a lot of your answers on GitHub. I think the best one,
yeah.
And I wanted to ask you that, can I ask you that? Why did you build a crypto library when Apple is already providing one?
Yeah,
Give me the same answer.
When I posted published the first version, somebody asked why would you do that? And yeah, and my answer was because I can, and that's basically the universal answer I can give. Before the CryptoSwift, I implemented another cryptography, OpenPGP, which was also demanding, and I don't have energy to explain to anyone why I'm doing that. I'm doing that because I want to and because I can. Well, not I feel educated enough for that, but I have fingers and I can build something.
I don't even know if you imagined that it would get adopted so heavily when you started working on it, right?
Yeah.
So that's also
Yeah.
Yeah, but the very specific answer was so inspiring to me because it explained a lot. I mean, about what goes going on around the open source world and how frustrating sometimes it can
Thank
be.
you. So I'm being inspiration also for other developers.
It's a different kind of inspiration.
TED Talk, then
but
inspirational talk. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Pedro, do you want to talk about sustainability in open source? I think this could be a whole talk, but
I'll try to be short. I think the biggest challenge is mental health. Because you start with something that you're passionate about and you build it and you're the only one there. You don't really know where the thing is going to go, but you're having a lot of fun. Then you get the first user, the second one, the third one, everything's still fun. You still use your free time for that until you're like, oh my God, I have to spend 2 hours every day working on this. Is this going to get bigger or worse? So then you see people telling you should put limits to yourself. It's yeah, tell me how to put limits in a brain. People are using your stuff, they're asking you things, and you want to be nice to them, you want to respond to them. But you have to deal with that emotionally and mentally. It's really tough. So at some point you wonder, what is my relationship with this thing that I created myself? So the whole thing evolves from it's actually fun to it's no longer fun to what do I do with this now? So going through the whole journey is really interesting. I think all of us in this panel have gone through that. And then at some point you have to wonder, what does this mean for me? Do I want to continue with this? Do I want to just leave things as they are and let someone else take it from me? It's very common to see people saying, my time is over. For example, we saw Felix Cross move from Fastlane. I think it's healthy as well for projects that things are rotating. In our case, we decided to kind of explore what we could do in terms of sustainability. And I don't want to go into that. Could be talking about that forever. But yeah, mental health is very important. And I don't see people talking about too much, only when it's too late. And that's unfortunate.
I agree. I wanted to add a little thing that we're kind of also, maybe we'll talk about it after you talk as a next question, but I think we're also just talking about the hard parts. There are a lot of super amazing parts. I can expand on it, but maybe we can finish the roundtable and then we can go to the good stuff roundtable.
Well, I face pretty much everything that the guys talked about because I've been doing it for a very long time. And from sustainability perspective, I can give you numbers because in 11 years that everything I did was free, I had $500 of total contributions from the industry, where my code has been powering up 80,000 applications, including apps that made billions of dollars. So there goes free stuff. Like, that's how people support it. Like when I did premium articles and I expanded on some of the stuff I wrote, I made way more in a few weeks. So unless you restrict some kind of access, some kind of premium features, like open source doesn't really scale very well. There are a lot of success stories outside of our industry where people started with open source and offered tiers of extra features that they actually made a business out of it. So there's a bunch of articles if anyone is interested in that. For me, I had funny stories because of back in Objective-C, which is where I started most of the open source stuff. There was the naming stuff, for example. You use the prefix, and my prefix is KZ, Krzysztof Zabłocki. And I would get German people complaining that it's wrong name because it's concentration camp, and I'm Polish, which was very very interesting to get.
I'm Jewish and I allow it, it's fine.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, when I did sorcery, originally it was called insanity, because there's this famous quote, doing the same thing over and over again is the definition of insanity. That's where I got the name from. And then I got a bunch of people saying, oh, this is ableist language, so it's like apparently hurting someone. And so people were like, oh, you should rename it. If you rename it, I would contribute to it. And I renamed it because, like, I want to be inclusive to everyone. None of those people that complained actually contributed anything. But they all said they would. And the other thing that you run into is I sometimes get requests. So, like, you cannot expect the open source tools to support 100% of use cases. That's just not possible, especially in larger tools like Sorcery, which, you know, has a lot of features. So I try to cover like 95% of use cases, and it's open source. You can contribute anything you want. Sometimes you get people that are privileged or they expect stuff. And I remember I got a like our issue request, and someone said what they want, and they also left, like, at the end, left a comment, it should be easy for you. And I was like, well, if it's so easy, just do it yourself. It's open source. So it's kind of annoying when you get that. But on the other hand, you cannot really build those kind of tools without community support. I have so many projects that maintaining just 2 of them is a full-time job. And I have like 20 open source things. So if I didn't have a lot of support from the community, like, I would not be able to have them running. And like Sorcery has never failed in, what is it now? 2016 was when I open sourced it first. There was never a time when it stopped working. And it's mostly because of the people contributing to it. What I had to learn was to let go of some of the standards that I personally have for my own code. So when I write code in professional environment, when people pay me for it, I write tests for everything. I have specific architecture approaches, very clean code. That doesn't work in open source, because the moment you start asking people for too much in PRs is the moment your PRs just hang on dead. So, like, sometimes I would ask people, can you add a changelog? And a PR is left for 2 months. Yeah. Wow. So what I learned is, as long as I have tests for the previous functionality, and if someone adds new functionality, they add tests as well, I am much more lenient on the quality of the code. Because as long as it's covered with tests, it doesn't do something really crazy, I'm okay with it. And once I changed that, I got a lot more contributors and a lot more people engaged in maintaining those tools. So make my life easier.
This kind of brings for a nice transition about the good parts. I just want to say about what both of you said about sustainability, that I think what most open source projects find is that the way to sustain a project is to have a mix of being open while selling something. And that something can be a premium service on top of the open source part, or consulting, or whatever. I think that's like a smart way to go. Like, a lot of companies that have started open source are like, that's the way they are earning their money full-time today. And I think that's also kind of what Tuist is trying to do.
I'm going to add something there. So I've been thinking a lot about what model would be the best for Tuist. And there are many models out there, not that many in the Swift community, but in JavaScript it's way more common to see like open source being monetized. And I was looking at models that are similar to Tuist. So basically what we're doing is, Tuist is an open core, and then on top of it, we develop like a service, a server that provides some paid features. And like the moment we introduced that, there was some hesitance. It's like, oh my God, like the expectations where everything is going to be free forever, free and open forever. And then the moment you show up with something like that, they're like, oh no, like what's going to happen to Tuist now? Are you going to close everything? And I was thinking, but we are not the only ones doing something like that. I was looking at composable architecture and what they do, and it's open source libraries on top of which they sell courses. We have open source core on top of which we sell services. But I think the difference there is that when they start with composable architecture, from the very beginning, they set expectations. It's like, there's going to be open source libraries and there are going to be courses. Those are paid. If you change the model later on, that's when things start to get complicated, because people come to your project on the assumption that everything is going to be free. And if you change that, people get super mad. And this is the toughest part. I think the best thing you can do is to set expectations as early as possible. But when we started building Tuist, we didn't really know where the whole thing would go. And it's really hard to know when you start a project. Of course, you're always ambitious, and in your mind, like, who knows, it will turn into a business. But back then, we didn't know. It was really hard for us to do that.
You could also say that about like free apps that add subscription all of a sudden, right? It's really the same thing, like, oh, this was free, now I have to pay for it, I'm not going to use it again. I'm like, eventually the amount of subscribers is smaller, but they pay usually. Like, the change is hard, it's like ripping a Band-Aid, but a lot of time it's needed change. I thought maybe it's cool to transition, like, to kind of want to say, maybe as an inspirational thing, like how much open source is given me, not just like taken from me, to not like make it seem as if it's just like a taking situation. So like I started my, like many others maybe in the table, like contributing to other projects. And I started by being like a very active contributor to RxSwift. I didn't found it, I didn't start it myself. And like what happened is that it just like boosted my level of Swift and architecture and understanding how to work with people and understanding different kinds of coding. It boosted all of these things amazingly. It opened me up to conferences like this one, right? It opened me up to being able to be a specialist in this specific field where I'm contributing my time. So there are other amazing aspects that of like going through this, like I had a book about it, like there are a bunch of like amazing aspects that you can gain from doing this open source work, even in a selfish way, which I don't think I contribute a lot of my time, but there are also like really nice financial monetized benefits outside of it, and like self-education and self-promotion benefits and all of these things. And I think it's worth mentioning that eventually we are all on stage here because we got known by working on those projects and keep working towards the community. And I think that also speaks loudly that it's not just sacrifice, it's a lot of sacrifice, but it's also like a lot of personal value for sure, and value for your own growth as a developer on things that you might not have any chance to do on your day-to-day job because it doesn't meet some ROI or whatever.
If I can add something to that, I mean, I don't have such a huge open source project like that, but like a month ago, I was able to join the contributors list on Tuist with a very simple bug fix on something I'm probably the only one using, but yeah, I didn't ask them. It's easy to do that yourself, but I try to put myself into that. And understanding the code base, it's really huge, probably the most complex I ever seen in my life. I learned a lot in just a couple of nights of spare time. And what I wanted to say here is that I think that people should be encouraged. And I wanted to ask you for the next transition to this, how can we encourage people not to be afraid of this maybe barrier they have to open the first pull request, or how they can pass from the issue to the PR in a way, in the smoothest way possible? Do you have any advice to that?
I'll just ask you before, how good did it feel knowing that you are using code inside Tuist that you fixed, that now your entire team is benefiting from?
Insanely
It's like
good.
a huge, like not like an emotional sense, like, of self-worth. Like, I fixed this thing, it bothered me, I went and fixed it, now all of these people are enjoying it as part of Tuist. I contributed to this tool. It's like a lot of
it was a really nice feeling.
Nice feeling.
Incredible. Yes.
Want to say anything about that?
I totally don't know. I have no idea. But I want to chip into the one thing that Krzysztof, Jesus, we Polish both, so I cannot even.
You should know, man.
Krzysztof said before, one with the name, so funny thing. So my latest project is ST text view, but the proper names should be SS text view. You feel it? It doesn't work since 1939,
yeah, that works less than KZ, I gotta say. So.
Yeah. And another thing, when I worked on trying to cash out some of my experience, I was rejected on the Upwork or something like that. There was a quick gig on adding or implementing something with the CryptoSwift, and I was rejected.
That's hilarious. That's so good.
So
amazing.
That's about my
like Chris Latner being rejected for a Swift job. That's really funny.
But I don't know how to encourage people. I'm open to. I'm aware that some of the stuff may be too hard to embrace, and maybe people get too ambitious. Maybe people are afraid of being exposed, and I totally understand that. I try to not be critical or anything. I just leave the peer open if it's not good enough. But that's also not a good strategy.
Yeah, I wanted to add that like it's super cool when you get to meet people through open source. It takes a lot of, like when someone shows up and then you see their good intents of like improving the project, you trust them, and then it's crazy to see what people are able to do when you trust them. And then you start giving them, like they come up with new ideas, and then you say, oh, that's super cool, like let's figure out what it means technically, what we can do there. And I met so many people through that. Actually, the reason why we came to the conference was because it would be an opportunity for me to, and for my partner Marek, to meet like with the other core contributors of Tuist, also users. And it's crazy when I think about the fact that this all started with just one person like typing some lines of code, and suddenly like you have people that you can collaborate with to solve problems or challenges that you all have, and that is very cool. And like, anytime like someone shows up, they bring up something, and for us it's not really a kind of like a request response type of thing. I need this, okay, we implement it. I need this other thing, also I implement it. More like, can you tell us more about like what brought you to Tuist? Why do you use it? What do you like about it? So what is that thing that you want to do? So will you implement it yourself? We give you the pointers, so we give people the pointers, and when they feel like we don't do the work, but when you tell them this is how you can do it, and then they do it, suddenly that person is motivated to do more contributions. Eventually, maybe the person leaves, but like maybe one day they will show up with one crazy idea that you never thought about, and like seeing those ideas coming from many different angles, and like being like shaping the project in a way is really fascinating to see as a maintainer.
I think that the first time that someone interacts with your project is like a super crucial point to show your best side as a person. Like you want to make them feel very welcome, even if it's just like a README fix, right? Like it's not just a README fix. Like you went by and you saw it and you actually spent your time to fix it because you cared. Like that's like a huge thing in my opinion. And I think once you merge something like that and give them a good word, like thank you so much for helping, and then next time they will come and they will want to help again, maybe on a bigger thing, and they will be more attached mentally to your project in general and contributing to it. I think it's like an actual company in a sense, aside from no money. You kind of try to give people confidence and trust, and try to let them work on stuff that they do well, and try to guide them and maybe even give them from your experience to make them feel better because they get to work on stuff they maybe wouldn't otherwise work on. And another thing that helps, I think, is that of these like good first contribution, stuff like that, you can mark issues, and that's always tempting. You can have a lot of some issues, and you can be very tempted to solve it yourself because it will be quickest, but you need to be like brave and like kind of let it hang there and let people try and catch those issues, because if you're always going to take care of everything, then no one is going to contribute. So I try to always leave, like, or at least I used to have that habit of leaving like good first-time issues on our X so people can kind of come in and contribute. I think that has worked well as well.
I think what matters is remembering that like we really appreciate people contributing to our projects, and it's a learning experience for both sides. So like I find myself learning a lot from people, even if they have less experience. Most of the time, if someone has a different background or have just started, they actually have fresher mind. Because if I've been programming for 28 years, even if I question the status quo because of the way I work, like building dev tools and stuff, I still have shortcuts in my mind that I would by default do. So when I get people to contribute to my projects, I can see a different way of doing things, and that lets me actually grow. And it's also like a very good thing for people contributing because it exposes them to different ways of doing code. It can improve their brand recognition. When I work with companies, I work as a consultant a lot of the times. I help build teams and mentor a lot of engineers. One of the things that I try to convince management to do is to give engineers time to do open source and blogging and stuff like that. It has value to people doing it, but it also has value for a company. Like, for example, when I join companies, usually there's a lot of engineers applying to it because of my brand. But it would be far better if the company that you work on has multiple people that are active in the community, because that's going to show you that you have good team culture in that team. So oftentimes you can actually negotiate with your management to get some time, like every second week, for example, 4 hours, and then do this contribution during work time. And that's a benefit for both the company from the brand perspective and to yourself for the future jobs. So you'll be able to show that, oh, I contributed to Eric Swift or I contributed to Sorcery. So there's a lot of benefits. There's very little con. If you run into someone that's an asshole in open source, I mean, you'll know, and they won't really have a lot of following.
It probably won't succeed anyways
Yeah.
at the point.
I wouldn't worry about that. And also don't worry about like making mistakes. Like, we're here to help, and I think that's really important to remember. We are empathetic, and we really appreciate it, because honestly, like, maintaining those projects would be impossible without help from other engineers.
Just another word about the personal brand thing. Just to add that, like Tuist is a good example of that. Like, I think that both me and Nathan, who are like both from Monday and are working. Like, Nathan was at some point a core contributor to Tuist. I also contributed a few things. Like, in Israel, we don't have like a huge iOS community, so people kind of know us as this company that does the open source stuff and the Tuist stuff and the modularization stuff. Like, they know we are advocating for these things and supporting these open source projects, and we actually support, like, Tuist is a project lately. And I think that not just as individuals, as companies, if you are in a position that you can make that kind of influence, we need to do more. We need to do better to support these projects, because our businesses count on it eventually. So yeah, that's.
For how long though? Like the open source projects that are funded by the companies, especially the startups, when the startups go out of business. What happened with the project? That's always a question, whether you want to actually use that project.
I think
I would rather trust Pedro with the Tuist than, I don't know, Google with the with the open source project, new open source project, right?
Yeah, it also explains why Fastlane was moved to the Mobile Native Foundation, because I think that it's. So Mobile Native Foundation is this kind of standalone organization that houses a bunch of open source projects. And the point is, it's like a steering group. It's like a work group that's managed by people from a lot of companies, but it's independent. And it means that those projects are getting like proper management. Fastlane had a lot of issues with bringing contributors in because you had to sign a Google consent, Google CLA thing to add PRs. Which is already like putting a PR up is already huge friction. So signing a contractual obligation is like very difficult.
That's actually a good thing.
Is it a good thing? If you're MIT licensed, it doesn't matter. Anyways, different talk.
It is a good thing.
I'll let you have your way.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about licenses in open source, but I think it's
we should talk
going to
about
be
GPL
fun.
later. That would be fun. Anyways, so I think having those kind of organizations is like a very good thing, especially if like a huge company can no longer support these projects. Like if, for example, Airbnb now stops making Lottie, like companies would come crashing down. Like so many companies use them, right? It is open source, and some other company will take it probably because it's so big, but it is always like a huge risk. Also epoxy, a bunch of like Airbnb has a lot of open source stuff that's like very heavily used. You always have to do the risk analysis when you take a dependency, like what is the lifetime expectancy of this thing?
React Native also. Yes,
We will
I
not say
said
these
that.
words on this stage. We shall not.
Flutter.
I wanted to add as well that sometimes, like when you want to support a project, the first thinking that you have is, I just give money, and money doesn't always solve the problems. I would rather prefer if the company, like Krzysztof said, like I have developers basically spending their time in the project. I would rather prefer that over take money, and money is gonna solve it, because most of the times money is not enough to pay someone's salary. So suddenly you have this money that you cannot use for salaries. What do you do with the money? Like a bounty program, but then on top of all the responsibilities that you had before, add the responsibility of managing the whole bounty program. So it's like sometimes I really think that like if you really want to contribute to a project, like think about. I would recommend to go back to your project, look at the list of open source repositories, identify which one is the most valuable, and next Monday you just reach out to the maintainer and say, we really love your project, we use it at my company, how can we support you best? And like sometimes you would be surprised that the answer is like, hey, if you could spend like, I don't know, 2 hours helping us with some minor issues here and there, that would be awesome. And you will be surprised that most of the times the answer, I don't think is gonna be, give us money.
I found myself in a bounty program once in a crypto SDK for work. It wasn't working. I fixed it for having it work with. Back in the days was still CocoaPods, I guess. They didn't have support, and they actually paid me crypto. And I found out that it's I would never have been involved in crypto if it wasn't for this. Random contribution I had back in the days. And what I saw is that is quite common in the crypto world. There's also a site, I don't remember how it's called, maybe you know, like GitHub, but something related to Bitcoin or whatever. It's common, but since there's money involved, what I saw is that the quality of the code apparently wasn't that good as compared to what I saw in other big open source projects. It was randomic, full of for some wraps, full of bad ideas. And,
I always say that people ask me like, how do we bring in open source code? So by the way, if we look at our parallel communities like JavaScript, you would bring in like a dependency, and it would bring like this huge tree of transitive dependencies that you have no control or understanding of what they do. You do not like, you don't even see that code probably because it's like dozens of dependencies for a single like left pad or whatever. So, but in Swift, I feel that problem isn't that bad, and also like a company or a developer needs to think about the code that they bring into their projects like it's their own project. They're just not writing it, but they are still responsible to vet it, review it, make sure it makes sense. And also I want to say one more thing about like developer breakdown that goes wrong. I don't know if anyone heard about this XZ backdoor thing that happened lately. Basically, some maintainer that I guess was burned out just added a huge backdoor to their dependency and released it as a new version. Then everyone got infected by it. And that included not just people that consumed that framework, but also people that consumed other frameworks depending on it. And because it was so small and low down the chain, it was like hundreds of dependencies. So that's like where these things can go wrong, to which I recommend always pin your dependencies to specific versions, but also like be careful who you take your candies and software from.
As if you know the randos on the internet.
Sorry.
You don't. The random people who contribute to the project, you don't know them. Like, how do you even validate that? Well, the one way is to have a CLA in place.
It wouldn't solve that actually. I think
no, it wouldn't solve.
To your question, if you're like very risk aware, you could fork it and have your own copy of it. But at the minimum, you should pin your version. It is much harder to fake that, because most package managers have SHAI checksum of the version. So even if you put a new release out, it might like get an error in that case. But yeah, it's totally broken eventually. Like if someone wants to do harm, they can definitely do it. So always like be on the lookout for sure.
Yeah, I'm totally not surprised by the XZ situation.
How many in the audience are doing open source contribution by raising hands? Wow. Okay.
Is it though?
Yeah, more than I would expect. So great job.
Good for you. We're all
The
very.
question is how many people use open source?
Yeah, that would be everyone.
Yeah.
So those who don't raise their hands just don't know they are using open source. You're definitely using open source.
Okay.
Do we have time for the whole topic of licenses is a very interesting one, and I would like to hear from the people here when it comes to like, now when I see like open source projects, the first thing that I do is looking at their licenses, especially if they have a business, because you can do a lot of things there license related to actually enable a business, and I wonder like when it comes to choosing a license for your projects, what's important for you?
Actually, that's funny. We just, I don't know how many people here look at things outside the iOS community, but do you know Redis? So Redis is a key value storage, super popular for caching. They just overnight changed their license, and now like you have to pay premium to use it. And then someone just like forked their implementation and released it under MIT. I think it's very difficult. I think it's very difficult to change courses, especially because of that, especially if you're big enough. I think as like, I always try to go MIT. I think it's like the most restrictive. People that don't know anything about licenses see MIT and feel safe, and I think that's good. If you see GPL, stay away. LGPL, same thing. Like there are great websites that show a list of what each license type means. Apache is also pretty good overall.
I once saw a fancy license with MARCIN name inside of it.
Yeah. With what?
My?
Yeah, I was about to use your crypto.
MARCIN license.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's not MIT, it's MARCIN, whatever it's pronounced, your last name.
Yeah. Well, the CryptoSwift license is based on BSD 3 clause without the optional attribution. So attribution is mandatory, and nobody cares about that. So I thought, back then I thought, okay, if I'm doing that for free, at least I will get some attribution for my work. But nobody really read the license, and I remember one interaction. So there was a big company and has an application in the App Store, and I noticed by some coincidence that they use CryptoSwift. So I went through the application and I didn't find the attribution, and I mailed them that. You know, you violate the terms of license, and oh yeah, okay, we'll fix it next time. So, you know, nobody cares about it.
I'm really red-handed as like, okay, fine, I'll add this file in this nested folder that you will never find in your app navigation.
Yeah. Also, so if I speak, so my current approach is having a dual license, and I experiment with that. So one of the project I have, which is Objective PGP, has a dual license, and the commercial license is like costs a few hundred euro, and the free version is not sure. I think GPL now. The thing is, if somebody wants to use it, still gonna use it. The source is on the internet, so they're just gonna copy and do not expose that they use it. But the big corporation that actually has the money always vet all the dependency, and the lawyers will come like, guys, we cannot use GPL. What are the terms? And I have an option to pay. I do the same with my latest project, ST-TextView, which is GPL and paid license, and the license is $5, I think. And even that is too much, apparently. But
the thing about GPL, just people probably don't know that GPL is like considered an infectious license. Basically, every framework and every app that uses something with GPL becomes GPL itself. That's very, very, very problematic. Like, that's very dangerous, legally
problematic
speaking.
for whom?
For the consumer. We are eventually still producing software that we are hoping people would use. We don't want to make it impossible for them to use. But like selling as an option is interesting.
You know the project OpenVPN, right? So the client is GPL. It's very widespread, and there are clients that use that. But if you want to use it commercially, you have to buy the license. I think it's fair.
Yeah, I think it's fair too. Yeah.
I read a book about open source recently, and they go through all the licenses, and when they go into HGPL, they talk about this idea of it infects your software. Like, it's what everyone says, it infects your software. And I think the framing is wrong, or the way they say it in the book is it's wrong, and they explain why. Like, in the end, like, it's kind of like the license of that thing that you're bringing to the project is in conflict with the license of your software. So that conflict is actually where you have to decide, like, do I use the library or not? But it's ultimately a decision that you make. Like, when you perceive the whole thing as it's going to infect me, it feels like someone is kind of attacking you, and then you put that license as the bad actor in the whole story. But it's actually ultimately your decision. It's like Marcin says, it's like, if like it's in conflict, but you want it not to be in conflict, I mean, you pay, I give you, and as he said, like, the big companies don't want to get in legal trouble, so they have the money, they just put it. But the whole infection thing is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you could cut your finger on a piece of metal, it will infect you. It doesn't mean it infected me. It's just an infectious license.
That's wrong wording, because he pictured GPL as that would be something wrong, but it's not. So the thing in the GPL is, yeah, of course it's infectious, but the thing is, you have to contribute back, which is great for the contributors, right? So the company cannot just privately fork the repository and build it internally, because according to the license, they should bring all the patches back to the original repository, which is great for the project. If they don't want to, yeah, let them pay.
No, but it also makes your own project have to be as open as the thing that you just consumed.
Only if you use that version. So the dual license is my answer to that.
No, I understand, but I'm just saying that if you have GPL, this is like, I'm sorry, like I say to the consumer, this is like a black dot. Like, I think I would never bring in anything GPL into my, it's just like too risky. I would prefer, like, having MIT with payment, I would pay for sure. But having a dual license of GPL and something just guarantees that people will pay, which is good. But the GPL is there for nothing. The main problem that I have with it is not infectious or not. It's just that people don't understand it. People don't know what it means. So they just see open source, they get it, and they have no idea what they just legally did to themselves. And I've heard terror stories about that. And I think that's, like, not of the best taste.
I think that the Italian way of handling this would be to fork the repo and then change the license type. That's a contribution, right?
That's good. I like that.
So
Yeah,
I can fork it,
and then you have to upstream your license change into the main repo.
There, block the fork option, right?
So that totally happened. And because I'm notified about some forks, yeah, I saw the fork that was just changing the license. And when I reached out to them, they deleted. But yeah.
Wow. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just use MIT just to make it easier on everyone. It's interesting because, like, I agree with Marcin. I know a lot of applications that use my code that don't list license, even though in MIT they're supposed to. To nice perks of open source, I forgot to say one thing. You know how people leave reviews usually when they're annoyed at something? Like, if you go to a restaurant and you get bad service, that's where you leave a review. But if you just enjoy the food, you don't really write anything. It's the same with open source. So even if you're not contributing to projects, but you find some project useful, maybe send a tweet or an email to the person that made it and say thank you. Like, I sometimes get emails from people, like, thanking for my software, or even at conferences, people tell me that, oh, it's like Sorcery or Inject has saved me hours. It makes my day. Yeah. It doesn't cost you much, but sending a small message to the creator actually gives us power and, like, empowers us to work on this project more. Because if everything works, oftentimes you just don't hear anything until you make a breaking change, and then everyone is angry. You didn't even know people used it, right? So it's something to keep in mind.
This is like part of the best part of conferences, I think. Like today someone came and told me, thank you for the work you're doing in RX and the combined stuff. And I agree. Like you don't know on your day-to-day, like you think that you're working on things that maybe no one actually is using. So it's nice getting that nice affirmation. It's like I wrote today that sometimes like you spend hours in a room making a talk for a conference and you don't know if anyone would even like or enjoy. And then getting that feedback on the software and the stuff you create in general is super like meaningful. So thank you for that.
I wanted to add about this CLA thing, which is the CLA is like an additional layer of agreement that you can automate, and why it is useful in the open source. So if you decide at some point, or the team decide to change the license, I'm not saying to change the paid license, just change the license. Then they have to find all the authors and have the permission to change the authors, or you have to rewrite parts of the codes. Given the CLA, you have all the contacts, so you can actually reach to the people. And that is quite important. I think the .NET has the problem when they switch from GPL to MIT.
I don't think it's true for, we don't have the time anymore, but I think it's true for that license.
Yeah, I would love to give the audience the license to get the aperitivo as soon as possible.
Let's do that.
Okay, so sorry for interrupting. This was great, actually. We also had some thoughts from the Slack channel from Nick Lockwood, who I think is the maintainer.
It's a shame he's not on this stage, actually. But,
yeah, but is it here? I didn't know that. Oh, sorry, man. I didn't know you were here. Swift format, right? Right?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
No, okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Swift format. What a great. So let's just think about it.
Bro, the beer.
There's Swift format and Swift/format, and dash format. Nobody used Swift dash format from Apple, but everyone used Swift format
People
open source from Nick.
Swift format from Apple.
Yeah, which is so great open source project. And if you have a chance to contribute, I really encourage you.
That's a really good one. Yeah.
So thank you for being here today.
Applause.
Great. Thank you.